Okay, everyone, welcome to the Net Plus webinar series for 2024. Today, we have an overview of the Net Plus services, Cloud Scorecard, and class. And again, I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here with us. And we're going to go ahead and move into the logistics of today's session. So as you know, your microphones and videos are turned off. The Q&A functionality will be used to submit any kind of questions. I will be moderating the chat as well as Sean. Sorry about that. And then there will be a limited time for follow-up afterwards. Today's event will be posted on the YouTube channel, Internet to YouTube. If you just type in I2 Online YouTube, you should be able to click the first link that pops up, as well as the Net Plus webinar series blog. These will also, the slides will also be made available on the blog as well. So without further ado, let's hand it over to the man of the hour, Sean O'Brien, our speaker.
Thanks, Jenna, and hi everyone. It's great to see some familiar names, great to see a lot of new names on the attendee list today. And thanks for joining us on our Internet to Net Plus overview webinar. We're kicking off a series, I think it's of 9 webinars total, where we tell you about what we're up to in the Net Plus program, give overviews of some of the services, and just some of the things we have going on generally. So at the end of the presentation today, and maybe someone can also drop the link in the chat, we'll have the full list of all the webinars in the series. If there are things you hear about today that you're interested in learning more about, chances are we're going to have a deep dive session on one of them, or a member of our team will be happy to meet with you. So just as background, as Jenna said, my name's Sean O'Brien. I head up Internet 2's Net Plus program. I've been at Internet 2 for a little over 10 years now, and have some experience in higher education and in industry before that. And one fun fact about me, I just carry the slide over from presentation to presentation. I'm a fan of bad New York sports teams, but they're not that bad this year, the Mets and the Jets. So things are looking up. So today we're going to talk about really 4 key areas within the Net Plus program. So some contextual things around the program. What is the program? Why do we do it? How does it fit into the mission of the organization of Internet 2? Some background on creating Net Plus, an overview of the Net Plus program and all the programs within the program, and then looking forward, some of the things we're working on, some of the things we're thinking about, and some of the opportunities to get involved and get engaged if there's things you want to learn more about. I will say, please feel free to use the question and answer function in the chat. I'm happy to try to answer things live as they come in, or we'll pause and also take questions at the end. So a little bit about Internet 2 and Internet 2 in the cloud. Internet 2 strives to be a community cloud solutions provider. So thinking about things like network connectivity, how do we help you get access in a cost-effective and secure and enhanced way, access to critical cloud services? How do we negotiate contracts, engage with vendors? How do we support functions like training? We're really looking at how do we help you collaboratively remove barriers to adoption of the cloud and enhance your use of the cloud. And the Net Plus program is a critical part of that here at Internet 2. We're always looking through the context of how do we support the research and education community's cloud journey. So, for those of you who have worked with us for a while in the Net Plus program, we spent many, many years thinking about some of these areas in the sort of getting started aspect of the journey. How do we help support business models? How do we help develop contracts? How do we ensure the cloud services that we have are integrated with the community's existing investments into cyber infrastructure, like the Internet 2 network and like in common? Things over the last many years have really progressed, where we're thinking about organizations that are moving from production and moving into production and scaling with the cloud. And really what we're seeing a lot now is how are organizations optimizing their use of the cloud. And we've been continuing to evolve and think about how we change and manage the Net Plus program to really track along this journey for our members here at Internet 2 and the broader research and education community. Within the Net Plus program specifically, we focus on four key pillars of how do we support the research and education cloud community. They are a cloud service brokerage function that is really thinking about Internet 2's Net Plus program. Traditionally, how do we help organizations and institutions acquire cloud services in a cost-effective, in a transparent, and in an efficient manner? And then how do we help them use them through things like training and workforce development, intelligent cloud usage, and vendor management at scale? So as I run through this presentation today over the next 50 minutes or so, these are really the four areas when we think about the Net Plus program that we're going to focus in on. But before we talk about the Net Plus program today, I thought it might be useful to give a little bit of context about the Net Plus program. Why did we create the program? I think that's always really interesting when you're thinking about engaging with an organization or a program is sort of understanding the why. 14 years ago, leaders in higher education got together along with EDUCAUSE and NACUBO, two other organizations to really think about the coming wave of the cloud and what the impact was going to be on research and education institutions as the cloud became more prevalent. And out of that summit, out of the report that was written, the idea for the Net Plus program was hashed as a way for the research and education community to think about how do we work with commercial services? How do we work with services that are not in our data center? How do we work with SaaS services collectively to remove barriers to adoption, but also to influence the vendor community to make sure that the needs of research and education are reacted to and are managed? So the Net Plus program was formed a couple years later. And when we look at the Net Plus program, we're really looking for services that can scale nationally, that are specifically designed to meet or are really important for the research and education community, solutions that leverage, as I was saying earlier, our existing investment in cyber infrastructure, ensuring services commit to the standards that we're all held to: accessibility, privacy, security, and other compliance needs. We're looking at how do we develop sales and business model practices that match what higher ed needs. And then finally, how do we package that all together into a contract that is consumable and adoptable by research and education institutions? So with that as background, let's talk about what the Net Plus program is. Let me give you an overview of what we're working on and some of the things we focus on. So let's first talk about how do we help broker and support the acquisition of cloud services. And traditionally, this is what the Net Plus program is all about. How do we bring groups of institutions together to deconstruct leading cloud services and make sure they're sort of put together, they're designed, they're packaged in a way that meets the needs of the research and higher education community. So there are really, this is sort of my favorite slide when I talk about the Net Plus program and try to help people understand what the Net Plus program is. There are really three things that make a service a Net Plus service. If you're looking at, a service and looking at, two options, two ways to get that service, what makes the Net Plus service different? These are the three things. So one, anything in the Net Plus portfolio goes through a community-led service evaluation process. I'll talk in detail about that, but that is a process where we bring institutions and organizations together to do the kind of evaluation they would do individually at all of their institutions, but do it once, do it thoroughly, and do it at a national scale. One of the great things about cloud is that it provides scale. If we can leverage the scale of our community to bring in some of the most talented security and accessibility and networking and privacy people from across the community to work together to do an evaluation, that helps everyone. That raises the tide for everyone. It also helps the vendors not have to go through those processes over and over again with multiple institutions. Secondly, a Net Plus service is backed by a negotiated group agreement, usually called a business agreement or a facilitation agreement. And that agreement ensures that the pricing, the terms, all of the things we worked on in that service evaluation process are codified and available to qualified institutions. And then finally, what really makes Net Plus unique, what I think our secret sauce is all the services in the portfolio are supported and maintained by a program manager, and those services that have a certain degree of adoption have service advisory boards. The community advisory board and the program manager, some of the program managers on our team here, really work hand in hand to articulate the needs of the research and education community to the vendor, to advocate for those needs, to think about what are their ways for collaboration around things like best practices, documentation, areas for training, and just other areas for collaboration generally. That really helps from our perspective lower the cost of ownership of some of these services, and also really build the community connection that's always been a key part of our community. We look at adding Net Plus services into the portfolio across these 4 different areas. So when we're thinking about what services do we add in the portfolio, we'll talk about why we add services in a minute, but really we're looking across infrastructure and platform services, SaaS, security identity, unified communications, and then we have a number of services now that we're talking to and looking at bringing into the portfolio around artificial intelligence. And you do have to give me some credit. We're 15 minutes into a presentation, and this is my first mention of AI, which I think is pretty good for any webinar that you joined, that I could have made it that far. Here's our portfolio of services today. We have well over 20 now. We had to update this slide twice, preparing for this presentation, because we've added 2 new services. We're sort of in this growth trajectory right now. And across these services, we have over 500 individual institutions that are subscribed to at least one service across 1,300 plus contracts. One of the things I'm most proud of is we've had over 140 institutions contribute to the service evaluation process that I'll talk about in a minute. But really, we've had 140 different institutions bring volunteers forward to help support the service evaluation, the contract negotiation, or otherwise supports the development of these services. One of the things I'll note on this slide is we really do try to keep the Net Plus portfolio between, or I'd say around 25 services. We're really focused not on the quantity of services that we can bring forward, but really the quality of services we can bring forward, so we can have a deep strategic relationship with both our community and the service providers as well. As I mentioned, all of the many of the services, most of the services have a service advisory board. We're really focused on how do we design everything we do to meet the needs of the research and education community. So we have a number of groups that provide us guidance, a group called CSTAC, the Cloud Services Technology Architecture Advisory Committee, that thinks about the technical standards of the program, the Business Procurement and Legal Advisory Committee that thinks about what do we do from a contract perspective, and then, of course, the service advisory boards that I talked about earlier that represent each service. If you're using a Net Plus contract, how does that help you? It reduces time. There's been a pre-negotiation done. We get pretty deep on some of those negotiations. Some of them take, multiple years in terms of negotiating terms and conditions to make sure they really meet the higher education need. Leveraging those hopefully reduces your time from a protracted negotiation, and hopefully reduces the cost of those legal fees and sort of the opportunity cost of picking what negotiations you might work on. We're price conscious in terms of trying to ensure that we have discounts that provide a good minimum level of discounting for those who are qualified to use the contract. And then we're thinking about, ways to reduce risk, ensuring the right contract terms are in there. But also typically our agreements have at least a 5-year term where you can know what the long-term pricing is going to be under this contract for at least 5 years, and that there's built-in pricing predictability and term predictability, even if maybe your institution or organization is only doing a 1-year term. So when do we add a service into the portfolio? We talked about what's in the portfolio today, but how do we continue to tune and evolve the portfolio? There's really two key reasons why we would add a service into Net Plus. So one, there's an unmet need in the market today for specific technologies. So really meaning we see a technology emerging. There's a number of things in the AI space today that are great examples of this. We see a technology emerging. We see a need for a solution that many, maybe most organizations within our community are going to need. And then we think about the process of how do we identify a vendor that can meet the needs of the research and education community. So to answer the first part of the question that's in the Q&A, in the last, say, year or so, and I have a slide that gets into this a little bit more specifically later in the presentation, but to answer the question now, in the last year or so, where there's been an unmet need in the market and we're really looking to try to identify a vendor that will meet the needs, that's when we go out and do an RFP and do a competitive procurement and really look at what the market space looks like, really look at how do we compare vendors, their capabilities against what the community's needs are. The other time when we would add a service is around when there's a challenge with an existing provider. So say, for example, not that this has happened recently, but a service provider decides that they want to raise their prices 10x or 20x or 30x for a specific service. It may make sense for the community to come together and engage that specific service provider around the changes to their business model. In that case, we typically wouldn't do an RFP because we're really focused on trying to solve a challenge with that specific vendor for the community. There's known challenges that we're trying to use our scale, our buying power, our collective influence to solve. Or we might bring in a competitor because we don't think that vendor can meet the needs of the research and education community anymore. Regardless of those two reasons, we only move forward with a Net Plus service evaluation, adding a service, if there are at least 5 member institutions who have raised their hand and said, I want to participate in a service evaluation process. I have a need right now where it makes sense for our organization to work with peer organizations to solve that challenge. The service evaluation process is the assessment we do. We try to keep that group around 5 to 7 universities, really representing the research and education community. What the service evaluation looks at is these 5 areas. Functionality, does the service do what we need it to do? Technical integration, can we integrate with both the community's existing cyber infrastructure stack, but also individual institutions' infrastructure or services that may require integrations? Security and compliance, ensuring we have a HECVAT, ensuring there's language negotiated around FERPA and HIPAA and data privacy, looking at accessibility and making sure the services, if they have a user interface, meet web content guidelines. I've talked a lot about the contract, and then I think maybe even one of the most gratifying parts is really trying to come up with, at the end of these service evaluations, things like deployment guides or other content that help the next university that's looking to adopt the service, or next organization or institution that's looking to adopt the service, efficiently, maybe not make some of the same mistakes or some of the same challenges as some of the early adopters. And the Net Plus program team, the program managers that we talked about, really work with the service advisory board to maintain that documentation over time. Speaking of overtime, what do we do over time? We do an ongoing review of those key areas: identity, networking, security, accessibility. We look at how do we convene the community around these services, the service advisory board, various working groups, various online communities of practice, ensuring that we're supporting standards and architecture related to the services. And then finally, administering and stewarding the contracts over time. I want to just give some examples of some of the unique things that we've been able to do over time, working collaboratively as a community. There's a number of examples on here. A global data egress waiver is a great example of that for some of these services. We've been able to come up with custom business models with services like DocuSign or Instructure, or Zoom, that really support some of the unique needs of higher ed, and some of the way things that are really unique for students. Convening the community is an important thing that we do and that we invest in. We run events like the Higher Ed Cloud Forum, the Higher Ed Summit at ServiceNow's Knowledge. We run a number of virtual events, both sort of open like this, but also many, many virtual events a week around the specific services in the portfolio. And then we really do try to focus on how we convene the community, working with the Higher Education Cloud Collaboration Call and the EDUCAUSE CCCG, supporting the HECVAT project and other activities. And one of the things I like to really mention is all of that work that I just talked about, the events, the cloud form, the Higher Ed Summit at ServiceNow, Internet 2's support for the CCCG or the HECVAT, that's all funded by organizations adopting Net Plus contracts. So not only do we think that Net Plus contracts for those services stand on their own in terms of terms and conditions and pricing and other things, but really when you're leveraging a Net Plus contract, when you're using a Net Plus service, you're helping to reinvest in all of these community activities and all the things that go around the Net Plus program as well. So moving on from the Net Plus program, I want to talk a little bit about training and workforce development and Internet 2's class program, which is our cloud learning and skills session program. You know, when we talked earlier about the sort of the cloud journey and the maturity of the cloud journey, you know, class is, I think, a key component in how do we enhance our workforce's cloud IQ? How do we make sure people have the requisite knowledge to do that? And one of the things we're really focused on in class is thinking about what trainings can we offer that are really focused on the unique needs of research and education that may not be served by commercially available or even freely available training programs that are in place today. So one of the things that we do in class, like our Class Advanced program, that's a program that's really, and a training that's really designed around how do we support researchers using the cloud. There are cloud fundamentals courses, there are basic cloud trainings that help that, but how do we put the research lens on that? For some of the trainings we do around specific service providers, if you think about services like AWS or GCP, you know, many trainings assume that there is a central IT that has control of all AWS or GCP spend. There's a nice, simple organizational construct and a single organization administrator, right? We know that's not the reality in this community. So how do we help take some of the best practices for setting up organizations, for setting up security controls, and train folks in the reality of what those look like in higher education? So those are just two examples of the things we focus on in class. We do have a number of upcoming trainings. Unsurprisingly, a couple of the earliest ones are around artificial intelligence, but also a networking in the cloud course that shows folks how to use Internet to use Insight Console to connect with cloud services. And then also our Class Essentials course, which really helps researchers support their use of three of the leading cloud platforms, AWS, GCP, and Azure, and does it in a vendor agnostic way. I think that's another thing that's really key to what we do in class is we're really trying to think about how we do these offerings in a vendor agnostic way, knowing that the R&E community is clearly focused on multi-cloud. When we think about intelligent cloud usage, the Cloud Scorecard is a platform that we've created that really helps the R&E community discover cloud solutions, understand whether the vendor solutions meet the basic requirements that you might look for, and helps the vendors build awareness around cloud services that are available. So thinking about the reality of there's thousands of SaaS services out there that students or faculty or researchers or other instructors may want to use. Our development of the Cloud Scorecard was really thinking, how could we create a public and a lightweight set of documentation that could help an organization quickly assess, is this the kind of service I would let into my environment? Or if you're looking for a specific type of service, go discover services that may meet your needs. The Cloud Scorecard today has 38 questions across these various areas. And what we tried to do is take some of the key questions we ask service providers in Net Plus, and that we evaluate in the service evaluation process, and create a self-assessment questionnaire that vendors could fill out to articulate how they comply, how they support the standards that we all need to adhere to and that are used in the Net Plus program. We continue to iterate on the questions as things evolve. So as you might imagine, we recently added some AI questions. We've tried to, as we've added questions, take out other questions to keep this pretty lightweight and keep this pretty high level. So if you recall earlier, I talked about how we try to keep the Net Plus service portfolio smaller. This is scale. This is how can we scale to thousands of applications and provide you all insights into them. The Cloud Scorecard, I'm sure one of my colleagues on the call can put a direct link in, but you can access it through that link, or simply go to your search engine of choice and search Internet to Cloud Scorecard, and you can start taking a look at the services that are in there. And we hope you do, and we hope you provide feedback on it. So I want to move into sort of what comes next and what are some opportunities to get involved, and then we should have plenty of time for questions, if I can be relatively pithy in this section, and maybe even give you all some time back between calls. We're working on a number of new Net Plus services. So I mentioned earlier we're in this growth trajectory, growth area. Between the time I started this slide deck and between the time I'm presenting it, the 1Password agreement has been signed. So 1Password is a service in the Net Plus portfolio today. We have several other active engagements, both around specific services that you see on the left side, but also looking at areas of interest to the research and education community. So private 5G and neutral host networking, third-party risk management services, a large language model gateway service. And I'll try to answer, again, another procurement question that came up. There's two pathways we take looking at services in the Net Plus program. So do we want a specific service? Our community comes to us and says, hey, we need this service in the Net Plus portfolio. We'll often go work with that service provider directly. Services on the left side of this slide. Our philosophy has been that there's a number of advantages to engaging some of those service providers directly. And that's what we do. That would then require an organization that is subject to requirement of doing an RFP, to do their own RFP or to leverage an RFP that another institution or organization has done for those services. When you look at the right-hand side of the screen, for those where we do an RFP, where we know we need a service to fit this function. We know if we're going to do enterprise scale adoption of large language models, we need a gateway service to provide basic functionality, but we don't know who we want to work with. Those RFPs are done sort of in a way that, or are done in a way that matches the standards that are needed for public procurement. And we've consulted with some experts internally, some community members on what the requirements are for that and what that competitive process looks like. So I want to talk to you about some of the new services, mainly because I think they're interesting, and I hope you do too. The private 5G neutral host network platform. We recently, in the last couple of weeks, announced an intent to award on that service to a company called Khajiit, and we're bringing Khajiit through service evaluation today. So thinking, how do we help organizations manage and expand 5G coverage, cellular, both look at ways to enable carriers on campus through neutral host architecture, but also enable private 5G access for institutions that are looking to deploy that. On the third-party risk management platform approach, we've issued an RFP that is in a review stage now. And that service really speaks to the need to help our security, our compliance colleagues manage the compliance requirements, the document collection, the audit requirements, maybe look at sharing some of those compliances across services. So how do we identify a platform that can really help us scale to meet all of these requirements of ensuring we're doing annual reviews of things like HECFATs or SOC 2s or VPATs or things like that. The LLM gateway service, you can see the function of the LLM gateway here highlighted in red. It's really, if you're looking to deploy a solution that allows, access to multiple AI models, maybe including AI models you're provisioning on campus, what technology sort of sits between those services and the application layer that end users are doing to do things like cost management, organizational guardrails and compliance, enable logging. Some of the cool things, some of these LLMs now can do caching. So where you're not constantly going out and paying a per token rate for requests, say, it's back to school season, right? If people are constantly asking when is the last day to drop a class, that can be cached and re-provisioned locally through a gateway, saving money and saving, some of the various resources that are required for that. We have a pretty active generative AI initiative right now with a community of practice, some collaborative purchasing opportunities we're looking at, and then some of the training and workforce development aspects that we talked about earlier. So as we finish up in the overview today, I wanted to talk about some ways to get involved. So certainly getting involved includes subscribing for a Net Plus contract and the discounting, and staying for the community engagement and support around the service, applying to join a service advisory board, joining one of the working groups like the AI working group I just talked about, participating in a service evaluation process, and then, of course, continuing to join us online as part of these webinar series. And there's a link there on some ways to get involved that, again, I think we can put in the chat momentarily. And then, of course, we'd encourage you, if you're interested in learning about specific services, or there were a number of questions about procurement today, those help us in advance of preparing for our December 5th session on procurement. We'd encourage you to come back and join us and sign up for other parts of the webinar in the series. We'll provide a link to the full service catalog as well as how to get more information. And from there, I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any more details on things that you all may want to know.
You got a few in the Q&A, Sean.
So I'm typing the answer to the RFP process one. I don't see any other open questions in the Q&A. Any other questions in the Q&A, or feel free if you want to ask a question live to use the Zoom feature to request to unmute. And I'll just add the question on a list of which ones were done through the RFP process versus service evaluation. So regardless of whether it's a negotiated contract or an RFP, we're always doing a service evaluation. That's always a component of the Net Plus service. But if you would like a list of what was done through an RFP, you can email us and email us any questions at netplus@internet2.edu. We are looking at we recently completed some enhancements to our service catalog, and the how is the service procured question is on the list for our next round of enhancements.
So Sean, they tell me the Q&A pod is not visible to others, so maybe you could go to the answered questions and read through those and make sure that everybody.
I'm happy to re-answer the questions. I hopefully answered the questions live, but the first question was, are negotiated agreements compliant with uniform guidance requirements? If not, how are institutions utilizing these contracts without going through a competitive bid process? So I think the answer to that is it depends. Obviously, some have been done through a formal RFP process, like we talked about. In other cases, institutions may do an RFP and select the Net Plus service through an RFP, may leverage an RFP that was done for a service and awarded to one of the Net Plus services by a different institution, either within their state or within a different state, if those states have the required reciprocity. And in at least a handful of states that I'm aware of, institutions have either opinions from the AG's office or otherwise have exemptions that allow them to use the Net Plus service based on the process we have, without having to go through a competitive procurement process. The second question was, does NetPlus follow a state-recognized procurement process that allows public institutions to use their contracts cooperatively? I think I answered that, which is for some services, yes, for some services, not. That, of course, depends on the goal we're after. Are we after engaging with a specific vendor to solve challenges with them, or are we looking at sort of a net new service area or category? When we do that, we do have an RFP process that is, that is documented and that is competitive. And then the question, the last question was around, is there a place to see where it's documented what's gone through an RFP process? And as I mentioned, please email us at netplus@internet2.edu, and we can provide that. It's a future enhancement we're looking at for NetPlus. And then finally, Jill is happy to see you, Bob. So Bob and Jill, great that you all got to see each other. Anything else? All right. Well, we definitely like to thank you for joining us today. And certainly if you have additional questions, things you want to learn about, feel free to email us at that email address, netplus@internet2.edu. And we hope to see you on our next one.